and gentlemen, this is Cecily Cardew and Gwendolyn Fairfax. We would like to remind you to please remain in your seats and refrain from talking as we are recording this performance.
There is no intermission, only set changes, and you may get food in between.
Please silence your cell phones.
And your children.
The concession stand is going to be closed during the performance.
It will only open after the performance is through.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope you will enjoy The Importance of Being Earnest.
Did you hear what I was playing, Wayne?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that. For your sake. I don't play accurately as anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of science for life, did you get those cucumber sandwiches for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
By the way, Lane, I see that from your book, on Thursday, when Mr. Worthing and Lord Sherman were here dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage as demoralizing as that?
It is a very pleasant state, sir, I believe. But I've had little experience with it myself, and that was a consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm very interested in your family life, Lane.
It's not a very interesting subject. I've never thought of it myself.
Very natural, I am sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't provide us a good example on what marriage is, what's the point of them? They seem, as a class, to be completely devoid of moral responsibility.
Mr. Earnest Worthing!
Ernest, my dear Ernest, how are you? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, oh, pleasure. What should bring anyone anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, dear Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to have a bite to eat at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
Well, when one is here in town, he amuses himself. When one is in the country, he amuses others. Both are irritably boring.
And who are these people that you amuse?
Oh, well, neighbors. Neighbors.
Got good neighbors in your part of Froshville?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to any of them.
How immensely you must amuse them.
Yes, but why all these cucumber sandwiches and why these cups? Why such reckless extravagance for someone so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, but I don't think Aunt Augusta will approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way she flirts with you.
Algy, I am in love with Gwendolyn. I have come to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I would call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I don't really see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, sure, but there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. One may be accepted. One usually is, I hear.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It's a great truth.
Well,
Sir, would you like me to bring the card case that he left here?
Good thinking, Lane. Yes, please.
do you mean to say you've had my card case this entire time? I wish to goodness you would have let me know about it. I was writing frantic letters to Scotland Yards, and I was quite nearly offering a large reward.
I wish you would. I happen to be more than usually hard up, and I'd wish you would.
Well, that is my card case, and you have no right to read what is written inside. It's perfectly ungentlemanly of you to read someone's private card case. For heaven's sake, just give it back to me, Algie.
Yes, but this card case isn't yours. On the inscription inside, it reads, "From little Cicely with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack." You don't know anyone of the name Cicely. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. I introduce you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking man I have ever seen. It is perfectly absurd saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on one of your cards. Look, Mr. Ernest Worthing, B. for the Albany. I'll keep this in case you ever try to deny it to me, or to Cecily, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country. And this same card case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but why does your friend Cicely call you her uncle? Come, old boy, you had much better have the truth out at once.
Well, produce my card case first. My dear fellow, the late Mr. Thomas Cardew, a man of very kind and charitable disposition, adopted me when I was just a small little boy and gave me the name of Worthing. His granddaughter, Cecily, is my ward. She lives in my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prison.
Where is this place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, my dear fellow. I must tell you quite candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. But continue, why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algie, I don't know if you'll be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. You see, when one is placed in the will of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as that same high moral tone can be said to conduce one's health and one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful of scrapes. Now that, my dear fellow, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is never pure and rarely simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
Well, that wouldn't at all be a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You should leave that to the people who haven't graduated a university. They do so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying that you are a Bunburyist. You might be one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What do you mean by Bunburyist?
You have invented a younger brother named Earnest in order that you may be able to come up to town whenever you please. I have invented a perfectly invaluable invalid named Bunbury in order that I may be able to skip down to the country whenever I please. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. Really, if it weren't for Bunbury's existence, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis, for I've really been engaged with Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know, it is rather rude of you. Nothing annoys people as much as not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is hardly enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do go down there, I am always treated as a member of the family, and sat down with either no women at all, or 2. In the third place, I know exactly who she's going to place me next to tonight. Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That sort of thing is not even pleasant, it's not even decent, and that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It's simply drying one's clean linen out in public. Besides, now that I know that you are a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, I want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you all the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, then I'm going to kill my brother Ernest. I think I'll get rid of him in any case. Cecily's become a little too much interested in him. But anyways, I am going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise you to do the same with Mr. Well, your invalid friend with the absurd name.
Nothing and nobody will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever do get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, then you will be happy to know Bunbury. You don't seem to realize, my dear fellow, that in married life, 3 is a couple and 2 is none.
My dear Algie, if Gwendolyn accepts me, and she's the only woman I ever loved in my life, I certainly wouldn't want to know a Bunbury.
Then your wife will.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical, Algie. It's perfectly easy of you to be cynical.
It isn't easy to do anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring that bell in that Wagerian manner. Now, if I can pull Aunt Augusta aside for 10 minutes in order that you may have the opportunity of proposing to Gwendolyn, will you dine with me tonight at Willis?
I suppose, if you want to.
You must be serious about it. I hate people who aren't serious about food. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Well, dear me, aren't you smart?
I'm always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry for a little late today, Algernon. I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger. And now, I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta. Lane! Where are the cucumber sandwiches?
There were no cucumbers at the market, sir.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
Aunt Augusta, I am deeply distressed about there being no cucumbers.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed color. From what cause, of course, I cannot say. Thank you.
Lane?
I have quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I am going to send you down with Mary Farquhar.
Ugh.
She is such a nice woman, and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I am afraid, Aunt Augusta, that I will have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I should hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your poor uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
Well, I have just received a telegram that my poor friend Bunbury has just fallen dreadfully ill. The doctors seem to think that I should be with him.
Strange. This Mr. Bunbury suffers from curiously bad health.
Yes. Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, I think it is high time that this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd, nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind should hardly be encouraged on others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your uncle, but he never seems to take much notice as far as any improvement in his ailments goes. I would be much obliged if you asked Mr. Bunbury from me not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has said whatever they had to say, which, in most cases, was probably not much.
I'll talk to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, and provided that he is still conscious, I think I can promise that I'll be fine and free on Saturday. Now, the music is a great difficulty, but I'll run over the program if you'll kindly step into the next room with me.
That's very kind of you, Algernon. Thank you. I'm sure the program will sound delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People seem to think they sound improper, and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German is a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe it is so. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mama.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I feel quite certain they mean something entirely different, and that makes me so nervous.
Well, I do mean something different.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And perhaps now I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Well, Gwendolyn, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite aware of the fact. I often wish that in public, at any rate, you'd been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. My ideal has always been to love a man of the name Earnest. There's something in the name that inspires absolute confidence. From the moment Algernon told me he had a friend named Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But you don't mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
But your name is Earnest.
Why, yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference to the actual facts of real life, as we know them.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, to speak quite candidly, I don't care much for the name of Ernest. I don't think it suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It's a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I think there are lots of much nicer names out there. I think Jack, for instance, is quite the charming one.
No. There's very little music in the name Jack, if any at all indeed. It produces absolutely no vibrations. Besides, I've known several Jacks, and they've all been, without exception, more than usually plain. Jack is also a common domesticy for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She is probably never allowed to know a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Well, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing.
Why, of course. You know that I love you, Miss Fairfax, and you've led me to believe that you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. You haven't even said anything about marriage. The subject hasn't even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I would certainly advise you to do so. And I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand, I'm fully intending to accept you.
Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
But you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course, darling. I don't know how long you've been about it. You must not propose very often. Men often propose for practice, I'm told. My girlfriends tell me so. My brother Gerald does. He's quite a lonely boy. Ernest, I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
My own one.
Mr. Worthing, rise from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mama, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing wasn't quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
Mama, I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing.
You are nothing of the kind. And when you do become engaged, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. A proposal should come upon a girl as a surprise. Pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly something she could arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. And while I make these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mama!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, the carriage.
Yes, Mama.
You may have a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell, but I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. I share the same list that the Duchess Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a truly affectionate mother requires. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. Now on to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I'm sad to say that I have lost both of my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? Evidently he was a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers called the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of aristocracy?
Well, you see, Lady Bracknell, when I just told you that I had lost both my parents, it is perhaps closer to the truth to say that they lost me. I was found.
Found?
Yes. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, a man of very kind and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he had a first-class ticket for Worthing in his back pocket. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a fine seaside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket to a seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag.
Yes, Lady Bracknell. A brown leather handbag with handles to it, a very ordinary handbag, in fact.
And in what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew find this very ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
Yes, the Brighton one.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I must confess I feel a little bewildered by what you've just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to show a contempt for the common decencies of family life, which reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I assume, Mr. Worthing, that you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As to the particular locality in which this handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station, might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. Has probably been used for such a purpose before now, but it could hardly be an assured basis for a good position in high society.
Well, may I ask what you would advise me to do? I assure you that I would do anything in the world to ensure Miss Fairfax's happiness.
I would advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and get some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce, at any rate, one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly do that. But I can produce the handbag at any moment you like. It is in my dressing room back home.
Mr. Worthing, this has nothing to do with me. You could hardly imagine that I or Lord Bracknell would allow our only daughter, a girl raised with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good day, Mr. Worthing.
Good day. For heaven's sake, don't play that ghastly tune, Algy. How idiotic you are.
Did it go off all right, old boy? Oh, don't mean to tell me that she refused you. She is always doing that. Gwendolyn has a terrible habit of refusing people.
Oh, Gwendolyn is right as a trivet. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. I've never met such a gorgon in my life. I don't even know what a gorgon is, but I'm convinced that Lady Bracknell is one. She is a monster, without being a myth. I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt like this before you.
My dear fellow, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only reason I keep them around at all. Relations are simply a tedious group of people who have the smallest intention of how to live or the smallest inclination of when to die.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It's a great truth.
Well, I don't want to argue with you about it. You always seem to want to argue about things.
So that is exactly what things were made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I think I'd just shoot myself. You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like Lady Bracknell? in about 150 years. Do you, Algie?
My dear fellow, all women do. That is their curse. No man does. That is his.
Is that clever?
It's perfectly phrased.
I
And-
am sick to death of cleverness. Everyone is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. It's an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had just a few fools left.
We have.
Really? I would like to meet them. What on earth do they talk about?
The fools? Why, the clever people, of course.
What fools?
Yes, but didn't you say that Miss Cardew had a particular interest in this brother of yours? If you were to kill him, wouldn't she feel his loss a great deal?
I'm happy to say that Cecily is not a silly romantic girl. She goes on many long walks, has a capital appetite, and pays no attention to any of her lessons.
I would rather like to meet this Cecily.
I will take great care to see that you never do. She is excessively pretty and only just 18 now.
Did you tell Gwendolyn that you have an excessively pretty, only just turned 18 ward?
My dear fellow, one doesn't just blurt these things out in conversation. What strange ideas you have about how to behave around a woman. But I am sure that Cecily and Gwendolyn are sure to become extremely good friends. I bet you anything you have that within half an hour of meeting each other, they will be calling each other sister.
One, the only way to behave around a woman is to make her love you. And, if she is plain, make her love someone else. Second, women only call each other sister after they have called each other a great number of things first. But it is nearly almost 7. You had much better change if you want to get a good table at Willis tonight.
Oh, it's always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew when you weren't.
What shall we do after dinner? Perhaps a theater?
Oh no, I loathe listening.
Then perhaps a club?
No, I hate talking.
A strut around the Empire at 10?
No, I can't bear looking at things.
Then
It's
what
so-
shall we do?
Nothing!
It is awfully hard work doing nothing. But I don't mind hard work if there's no definite object of any kind. Perhaps we should... What nothing consists of.
Perhaps.
Lane,
Yes, sir.
Has Miss Fairfax arrived?
I think she's coming up now. Let me get her. Miss Fairfax!
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Gwendolyn, I don't know that I can approve of that very much at all.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do so. Ernest, I fear we will never be married. From the expression on Mama's face, I fear we never shall. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mama, I lost at the age of 3. And although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, nothing she can ever do will possibly alter my eternal devotion to you.
My dear Gwendolyn.
Ernest, the story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mama, with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination, and the simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
Ah, yes. The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
It has a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something quite desperate. That, of course, will require considerable consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long are you in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn around now.
Thanks, I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling.
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane. Tomorrow, Lane, I am going Bunbury.
Yes, sir.
I won't be gone until Monday, but you can pack my Bunbury suits, the card-playing suits, the normal suits.
Yes, sir.
I do hope tomorrow will be a good day, Lane.
I don't think it will be, sir.
Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
Thank you.
That will do, Lane, thank you.
Thank you.
Ah, yes, now there's a sweet, intellectual girl. The only one I ever loved in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Sorry, I'm just thinking about poor Bunbury.
Well, you don't take more care of Poor Bunbury. And he's going to get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
No, that is nonsense, Algie. You're never talking anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily, surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially when intellectual pleasures are awaiting you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray, open it to page 15. We will review yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know quite well I look perfectly plain after my German lessons.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German grammar when he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays particular stress on your grammar.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I fear he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one with a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we throw together.
Cecily! I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember that constant anxiety of his, that unfortunate young man, his brother.
Oh, I do wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him. I'm sure you certainly would. You know German and geology, and things of that kind influence men very much.
Oh, I do not think that even I could have any effect on a character which, by his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not entirely sure that I would wish to reclaim him. I am not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad men into good men at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. You must stop writing in your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, dear Cecily, is the diary which we all carry around with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Maudie sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope that not end happily. I can't stand novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
Yes, I suppose so, but it seems a little unfair. Was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up to the garden.
Dear Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasant surprise.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache, and I think it would do her so much good to take a short stroll with you to the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
I know that, Miss Prism, but I felt instinctively that you had one. In fact, I was thinking about that, and not my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you were not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is so strange. Would I be fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lip. I spoke metaphorically, of course. My metaphor was drawn from beads. And I suppose Mr. Worthing has not returned from the town yet.
Oh no, we do not expect him back until Monday afternoon.
Ah yes, he likes to spend his Sunday in London. He's not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, like that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. Well, I shall not intrude on Aphrodite and her pupil any longer.
Aphrodite, my name is Laetitia, Doctor.
A classical illusion, merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear doctor, that I will have a stroll with you. I find I do have a headache, and a walk might do me some good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily! In my absence, you will read your political economy. You may omit the chapter on the fall of the rupee. It is far too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
A Mr. Ernest Worthing just came in from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany W, Uncle Jack's brother. And did you tell the gentleman that Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss, but he seemed very troubled by it. I told him you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He seemed anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Pray, ask the gentleman to come here. I suppose you had better see to the housekeeper about getting a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he'll look just like everyone else. He does.
You are my little Cicely, I am sure.
You are in some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I am more than usually tall for my age. But yes, I am Cecily. And you, I see, are Uncle Jack's brother, his brother Earnest, his wicked brother Earnest.
Wicked? Cicely, you would much not think of me as wicked.
If you are not wicked, then you have certainly been deceiving me in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all along. That would be hypocrisy.
Well, I suppose I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yes, I have been very bad in my own small way.
You should not be so proud of that, though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It's much pleasanter being here with you.
But I can understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday at the latest.
Oh, ha. That is a great disappointment. I have a train first thing to catch in the morning. I have a business appointment in London that I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, of course I know how important it is to not keep a business engagement if one wants to keep any sense of the beauties of life. But still, I think you had better stay on till Uncle Jack returns. I just know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone to buy your outfit.
Upon my word! I would not let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in vests at all.
Where he is sending you, I don't think you're going to require vests. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die!
Well, Uncle Jack said last Wednesday dinner that you would need to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Upon all of the accounts that I have received of Australia and the next world, I think this world is good enough for me.
But are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I thought you might reform me. You might make it your mission of sorts.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind me reforming myself this afternoon?
It's rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I'm feeling better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you, but I'd much rather have a buttonhole first. I can hardly fetch up any appetite without having the buttonhole first.
A Mahershala?
No, I think I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cicely.
I don't think you should talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things.
Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I have ever saw.
Miss Prism says all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that any sensible man would love to find himself caught in.
Oh, I shouldn't care to catch a sensible man. I wouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Trasable. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand, but a womanthrope? Never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The practice, as well as the precept of the primitive church, was strictly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. Besides, dear Dr. Chasuble, you do not seem to realize that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
And is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often I've been told not even to her.
That depends entirely upon the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted, but young women, they are green. I spoke horticulturally, of course. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to school?
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not expect you until Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than expected. Dr. Chasuble, I do hope you are well.
Mr. Worthing, I hope this garb of woes does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance?
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead.
Your brother Earnest? Dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, you have my sincere condolences. You at least have the consolation of knowing that you're always the most forgiving and generous of brothers.
Yes. Poor Ernest. He had so many faults, but this is indeed a very sad blow.
It is a sad blow indeed. Were you with him at his last moments?
No, he died abroad in Paris. I just received a telegram from the Grand Hotel there.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment be taking place here?
No, he seemed to have expressed a deep desire to be buried there in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to a serious state of mind at the last. But I suppose you shall want me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction on Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion. Joyful, or in this present case, distressing. I've preached at cathedrals, christenings, confirmations, and days of humiliations, and the festival days. The last time I delivered it was in the Grand Cathedral as a charity for the Society of Discontent among the upper orders. The bishop who was present was much struck by some of the analogies that I drew.
Yes, but that reminds me, Dr. Chasuble, you mentioned something about christenings. I suppose you know how to christen, all right?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have spoken to the younger classes about it, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
Is there any particular infant in whom you're interested in, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
Most people who live entirely for pleasure are.
But I don't see there being much fun in being christened alongside a bunch of babies, do you?
No, but all that you need is a sprinkling. When would you want the ceremonies performed?
Well, I might just trot around about 5 o'clock, if that would suit you. Well, 5:30.
Admirably. But, Mr. Worthing, I cannot disturb a house of sorrows any longer. I ask you not be too bowed down by grief. Their trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me to be a blessing of an extremely obvious kind. I'm so glad he's dead.
Where is Cecily?
Such a relief. I mean, Cecily was getting far too obsessed. And you actually do know it was terrible. I'm so glad.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I'm so pleased to see you back. Oh, what horrid clothes you have on. Go do and change them at once.
Cecily!
My child.
What is the matter? You look as if there's something wrong. like a toothache. But I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in your dining room right now?
Who?
Your brother!
What?
Your brother Ernest, he arrived half an hour ago.
What do you mean? I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. No matter how badly he may have treated you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't disown him, could you? I'll go call him here, and you will shake hands with him, won't you?
These are joyful tidings.
My brother, Earnest, is in the dining room? I don't know what it all means. It's all perfectly absurd.
After we had all been resigned to his death, his sudden reappearing is very distressing.
Good heavens!
Oh, Brother Jack. I am terribly sorry for any adversity that I might have caused you, but I promise to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand, are you?
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think of his coming down here as rather disgraceful, and he knows very well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me all about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so very often, and surely there must be good in someone who leaves behind the pleasures of London to sit beside a bed of pain.
Well, he's been talking about Bunbury now, hasn't he?
Oh yes, he's been telling me all about his terrible state of health.
Of course, I admit all of the faults were on my side, but I must admit that Brother Jack's treatment of me is particularly discouraging. Well, especially because this might be the first time I've come down here.
I won't have him talking to you about Bunbury or about anyone else. It's enough to drive one perfectly insane.
Uncle Jack, if you do not shake Ernest's hand, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Oh, well, I suppose. But this is the last time I shall ever do it.
Isn't it pleasant to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You've done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I'm so glad.
You young scoundrel, Algie. Look what you've gotten me into. You've got to leave by the 4 to 5 train.
I've put Mr. Ernest Worthing's luggage in the room next to your own, sir. I suppose that's all right.
What?
His luggage, sir. It's in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a large dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a very large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay for more than a week.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest here has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I haven't been called anywhere.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never once interfered with my pleasures.
I have no doubt about that.
Well, Cicely is quite darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You should go and change them. It is very vulgar to be in mourning for a man who is very clearly alive and in reality staying in your house with you for more than a week.
I will not have you staying in my house for more than a week. You have got to leave now by the 4 to 5 train.
I could hardly leave you when you were in mourning. It would be most unfriendly of me. I'd hope that you would do the same for me. It would be most unfriendly if you wouldn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, but be quick about it. I never saw someone take so long for so little result.
Well, at least I'm not as overdressed as you always are.
If I am ever overdressed, I make up for it by being immensely overeducated.
Algie, your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage, and your presence here in my garden is utterly absurd. You have got to leave by the 4 to 5 train, and I do hope you have a pleasant journey home. This Bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I am in love with Cicely, and that is everything. But I must make arrangements for another Bunbury before I go. And there she is.
Oh, I just came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It is a very painful parting.
It is always very painful to part from a person whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends, one can endure with equanimity. But even a momentary separation from someone whom one has just met is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope I don't offend you, Cecily, when I say, quite frankly, that in my eyes, you are the physical personification of absolute perfection.
Your frankness does you credit, Ernest. I hope you'll not mind if I write down your remark into my diary.
You have a diary? I'd give anything if you'd let me read it.
Oh no, it is very private. But please go on. I absolutely delight in taking down from dictation, and I have reached absolute perfection. I'm quite ready for more. Oh, not like that, Ernest. Stand up straight, shoulders back. Yes. Don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell cough.
Cecily, ever since I first laid eyes on your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have promised to love you wonderfully, passionately, desperately, hopelessly.
Oh, I don't think you should say to love me desperately and hopelessly. Hopelessly does not seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
The dog cart's still waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round this time next week.
Yes, sir.
I don't think Uncle Jack would like it very much if he knew you were going to stay on till next week.
I don't care about Uncle Jack or anyone else. All I care about is you. I love you. Cecily, will you marry me?
Of course! Why, you dear romantic boy. Well, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it'll be exactly 3 months this Thursday.
Oh! And how did our engagement get settled?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a very young and wicked brother, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is always talked about is always very attractive. I dare say it was foolish of me, Ernest, but I fell in love with you.
Darling, but when was our engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the struggle one way or another. After a long struggle, I accepted you next to this dear old rosebush. The next day I went into town and bought this ring, and this is the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
I did give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Oh yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. And this is the letterbox, in which I kept all your dear letters.
My letters! Cecily, I never wrote you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well how I was forced to write them for you. I wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Do let me read them.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They'd make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote to me after I had broken off our engagement are so beautiful, so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But, Cecily, why was our engagement broken off? I am particularly discouraged to hear that this engagement was broken off. I had done nothing.
It would hardly have been a real engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
Oh, you dear romantic boy. I like your hair so much. I hope it curls naturally, does it?
Yes, darling, with a little help from others.
Oh, I'm so glad. Of course, there is the subject of your name.
My name.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it has always been a very girlish dream of mine to love a man by the name Earnest. One feels there's something in the name that inspires absolute confidence. Earnest. In fact, I pity any married woman who loves a man who's not named Earnest.
But Cecily, you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name was something else?
But what other name?
Any name you'd like. Like, oh, I don't know, Algernon. Algernon?
But I don't like the name Algernon.
My dear, sweet, romantic Cecily. I can't think of any reason why you would object to loving the name Algernon. I think it's a rather aristocratic name. Nearly half of all the chaps in the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name was Algie?
I might admire you, Ernest, and I might admire your character, but I could not give you my full and undivided attention.
Your rector here is thoroughly experienced in all the rites and passages of the church.
Oh yes, Dr. Choswell is a much learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him on a very important business. I must see him on a very important business.
Considering we've been engaged since February the 14th, and I've only just met you, isn't it rather harsh that you should leave me alone for so long?
I shouldn't be away for 30 minutes. What's that?
What a dear, impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must write down his proposal into my diary.
Hey, Miss Fairfax has just called in to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, she states.
Is it Mr. Worthing in the library?
No, he went the direction of the rectory a long time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And bring some tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, one of the good elderly women associated with Uncle Jack and his philanthropic work in London, I am sure. I don't quite like women interested in philanthropic work. They're so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax!
Pray, hello, Miss Fairfax. Pray let me introduce myself to you. I am Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew, what a sweet name. I like you already more than I can say, and my first impressions of people are never wrong.
How kind of you to like me so well after we've known each other for such a short time. Won't you sit down?
I may call you Cecily, may I
And you
not?
will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish, then that is quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favorable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've never heard of Papa, I suppose.
I don't think so.
Well, I'm glad to say that outside the family circle, Papa is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the perfect sphere for the man. Cecily, Mama's views on education, which are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted, so you don't mind my looking at you through my glasses.
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. In fact, I am very fond of being looked at.
You're here on a short visit, I suppose.
Oh, no, I live here.
And your mother, or some female relative of advanced years, resides here also?
Oh, no, I have no mother, nor, in fact, any relatives.
Indeed.
My guardian, with the help of Miss Prism, have the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Mr. Worthing never mentioned to me he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I can't say that this news fills me with feelings of unmixed delight. And now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help but expressing a wish that you were, well, somewhat older than you appear to be, and not so very alluring in appearance. If I may speak candidly.
Oh, pray do. I think that when one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always speak quite candidly.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, I wish that you were fully 42, and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong and upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the most strong character can be swayed by the physical charms of others.
Gwendolyn, did you say Ernest?
Yes.
But it is not Mr. Earnest Worthing who is my guardian, but his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for quite some time.
Ah, that accounts for it. Now that I think of it, I've never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems disgraceful to most men. Cecily, you've lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if a cloud had come upon a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Gwendolyn, there is no reason why I should keep it to a secret of you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week that Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I'm afraid there must be some slight error. You see, Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married. The fact will be announced in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
You must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
I'm afraid there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. You see, Mr. Earnest proposed to me yesterday at 5:30. If you care to verify, pray do so. I'm so sorry if it's any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than you can imagine, Miss Fairfax, if it has caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I think it my moral duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On moments such as these, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrap Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing this shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I'm glad to say I've never seen a spade. And it's obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual. Any interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew? Oh, a great deal many. From the top of one of the hills, one can see as many as 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in London.
Yes, what a well-kept garden, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here as people are in London.
I honestly don't understand how anyone can live in the country, if anyone does at all. The country always bores me to death.
This is what they call agricultural depression, is it not? Almost as depressing as the state of your curls, not to mention your eyesight. Would you like some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Yes, thank you. Detestable girl.
Sugar?
No, sugar's not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter. Cake is rarely seen in the most fashionable houses nowadays.
And this to Miss Fairfax?
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I distinctly asked for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the sweetness of my nature and the gentleness of my disposition. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I first met you, I knew that you were distrustful. I thought that you were false and deceitful, and my first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am intruding on your very valuable time. Ernest! My own Ernest!
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Why, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may. Miss Fairfax, I knew there must be some misunderstanding, for the gentleman whose arm is presently around your waist is not Mr. Ernest Worthing. This is John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack.
Oh, here is Ernest. Oh, a moment, darling. Are you engaged to this young lady over here?
Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn.
No, who could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you, you may.
I'm afraid there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. You see, the man who is now at present holding your hand is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Algernon Moncrief. Oh, Algie, is your name really Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
Well, I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked, but my name is John. It has been John for many years.
A gross misconception has been practiced upon us both.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, won't you?
Always. There is just one question I would like to be able to ask my guardian.
Yes, an admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, we are both engaged to your brother, Mr. Ernest Worthing. So it is a matter of some importance to both of us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, It is a very painful thing for me to be forced to speak the truth, but here it is. I have no brother, Ernest. I have no brother at all. I have never had a brother in my entire life, and I certainly have no intentions of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Never. Ever of any kind?
Never. Not of any kind.
I'm afraid it's quite clear, Miss Cardew, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone. It is not a very pleasant situation for any girl to find herself in, is it? No. Let us go into the house. They will not venture to follow us there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call Bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it has been. Maybe the most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had.
Well, you have no right to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. Any serious Bunburyist knows that one has a right to Bunbury wherever one pleases.
Serious Bunburyist? Good heavens, Algy.
Well, one must be serious about something. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in this entire wretched business is that your little friend Bunbury is quite exploded.
Your brother's looking a little off color, isn't he, Jack?
Algy, how can you sit here calmly eating muffins when we are in this terrible trouble? I cannot make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless, Algy.
When I am upset, I eat. And at the present moment, muffins are in front of me. Besides, I particularly like muffins.
Well, it's perfectly heartless of you to eat muffins under these circumstances.
But the muffins are the same.
That doesn't mean you should eat them in such a greedy way.
I wish you would eat the tea cake instead. I don't like the tea cake.
Good heavens, I suppose a man can't eat his own muffins in his own garden?
You just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you to eat muffins under these circumstances.
The muffins are still the same.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly expect me to do that without having dinner first. Only people like vegans ever do that. Besides, I have a meeting with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 6 o'clock under the name Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that wretched business, the better. I have made an appointment with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:30, and naturally, I will be taking the name of Ernest. We can't both be christened Ernest. It's absurd. Besides, I have every right to be christened if I like. It is very probable to think that I never was christened. Dr. Chasuble agrees. Your case is entirely different. You have been christened already.
Yes, but that was not some years ago.
Yes, but you have been christened.
Quite so. I know my constitution can stand it. You need hardly remember that a very dear friend of yours was just eliminated by a severe chill. I think it's rather dangerous that you're venturing it now. Something may happen to you.
But I thought a severe chill wasn't hereditary, or anything of that kind.
It usedn't to be, but it is now. Science is always making those sort of wonderful improvements on things.
That is nonsense, Algy. You're never talking anything but nonsense.
The fact that they did not follow us once into the house, as anyone else should have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating and throwing muffins. That looks like repentance.
They haven't looked at us once. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't to cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery!
They're coming this way. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly, it's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to be producing an unpleasant effect. A most distasteful one, but we will not be the first to speak. Certainly not. Mr. Worthing! I have something very particular to say to you.
Yes, Gwendolyn, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I may have the opportunity of meeting you.
That seems a very satisfactory answer, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't, but that does not take away from the way in which he answered me.
Yes, I guess in moments such as these, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation do you have for pretending to have a brother named Earnest? Was it so that you could come up to town to see me?
Can you deny it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts on the subject, but I intend to crush them. Now is not the time for German skepticism. Both their answers seem reasonably satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said.
Then are we to forgive them?
Yes.
No, true. There are certain principles at stake that one cannot simply surrender. But who should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not say it at the same time?
Yes, I'm often speaking at the same time as other people.
I know.
Will you take the time from me?
Certainly. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names, is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For me? You would do this terrible thing?
Yes.
To please me, you are willing to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where self-sacrifice is concerned, men are far beyond us.
These men have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing. Darling.
Lady Bracknell!
Good heavens!
Gwendolyn, what is the meaning of this?
Merely that I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mama.
Come here. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind shows mental decay in the young and physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid. But of course, you must clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter will cease from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all my points, I am firm.
I'm engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And as a matter to Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
may I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Bunbury? No. He is not here at present. He is somewhere else. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead. When did he die? His death must have been very sudden.
I killed. Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury? He was quite exploded.
Exploded. Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage?
No, my dear Aunt Augusta. He was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. That is why he died. That is what I mean.
Well, I'm glad he made up his mind to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice as well. Now, Mr. Worthing, may I ask, who is that young lady whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That young lady is Miss Cecily Cardew. She is my ward.
But I am engaged to be married to Cecily Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
What Mr. Moncrief used to say, Lady Bracknell, is that he and I are engaged to be married.
Yes.
I don't know if there's anything peculiarly exciting in this air of the particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements going on seems to me considerably above the average that statistics have laid down for guidance. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were families of 4 persons whose origin was a terminus.
Well, Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of Prelate Mr. Thomas Cardew, Lady Bracknell.
That is not unsatisfactory.
Yes, I have preserved the court guides of the period. They are here and open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known there to be strange errors in that publication.
Well, Miss Cardew's family solicitors are the Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby, and Markby, a firm known to have the highest position in their profession. Indeed, it can even be said that Mr. Markby can be seen at dinner parties. As of yet, I'm satisfied.
How extremely How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. May I also have you know that I have here with me certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, registration, vaccination, whooping cough, and the measles, both German and English variants.
Ah, a life full of incident, I see. Though perhaps a little too much excitement for one so young. I myself am not an advocate for premature experiences. Gwendolyn, the time approaches for our departure. We haven't a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I should probably ask if Miss Cardew has any fortune.
Oh, merely about 7,000 or 8,000 pounds in the funds. But goodbye, Lady Bracknell. I'm so pleased to have seen you today.
7,000 or 8,000 pounds, and in funds? But Miss Cardew is a especially attractive young lady now that I look at her. Young people nowadays hardly have any of those really solid qualities, the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come here, my dear. Pretty child, your dress is sadly simple, and your hair looks as if nature has left it. However, that is all alterable. Kindly turn around for me, dear. No, the side view is what I want. Ah, just as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The chin a little higher. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
there are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, prettiest girl I have ever seen.
Pardon my interruption, everyone, but this marriage is entirely out of the question. As Miss Cardew's guardian, she cannot marry until she comes of legal age without my consent. That same consent I harshly decline to give.
Sit down, dear. How old are you?
Well, I'm 18, but I admit to 21 at dinner parties.
You are very right in making a slight alteration. Women should never be completely honest about their age. It looks so calculating.
Well, I suspect Mr. Moncrief here of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He's an Oxonian.
I'm afraid there can be no possible doubts about the matter. Just this afternoon, while I was off on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, and I'm just now being informed by my butler, a full pint bottle of Péage Brew 89, a wine I had specifically reserved for myself. His disgraceful deceits continue into the afternoon, which, over the course of it, he succeeded in alienating the affections of my one and only ward. Naturally, he stayed to tea, where he devoured every last one of my muffins. What makes his actions all the more heartless is the fact that he knows quite well that I have no brothers, that I have never had a brother, and I do not intend to have one in the future. I told him so just yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct towards you.
That is very, very, very generous of you, Lady Bracknell, but my decision remains irrevocable. I decline to give my consent.
On what grounds, may I ask?
I suspect him of being untruthful. Also, it states very specifically in Mr. Cardew's will that Miss Cecily cannot marry until she is 35.
That does not seem a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London is full of the highest-born women who have, of their own free will, remained 35 for years. The Duchess Dumbleton is a good example. She has remained at the age of 35 ever since she turned 40, and that was many years ago.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Ooh. For you, Cecily, and
I suspected as much, but I can't wait. I hate waiting even for 5 minutes, and waiting even to be married is quite out of the question.
then what shall we do?
I don't know.
Mr. Worthing, seeing that Miss Cardew cannot possibly wait until she is 35, a comment in which, I must admit, seems to show a very impatient nature, I must beg of you to reconsider your decision.
Well, my dear Lady Bracknell, the decision is entirely in your hands. As soon as you consent to my marriage with dear Gwendolen, I would be more than happy to allow your nephew to form a small alliance with my ward.
And you must clearly know, Mr. Worthing, that what you propose is quite out of the question.
Well, then a passionate celibacy is all any of us have to look forward to.
That is not the destiny I want for Gwendolen. Come, dear. By now we have missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more would lead to speculation on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir? Is that not a bit premature?
These two gentlemen here have given a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. Think of such excesses.
Am I to understand then that there won't be any baptisms this afternoon?
Well, as you can see, Doctor, from the circumstances, I don't think it would be of much value to either of us.
Mr. Worthing, I'm grieved to hear such sentiments from you. They savor the views of the heretical Anabaptists, the views I've strictly refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. And according to your peculiarly secular mood, I shall return to the church at once. Yes, the pew opener has informed me that Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I'm on my way to join her.
Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect who is remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the perfect picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Well, for the last 3 years, Miss Prism has been Miss Cecily Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
Despite of what I hear of her, I must see her. Let her be sent for.
She approaches.
I was told you were waiting for me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been there for 1 hour and 3/4.
Prism. Come here, Miss Prism. Prism, where's that baby? 28 years ago, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104, Upper Grosvenor Street, with a perambulator containing a baby of the male sex. But you never returned. After weeks of the Metropolitan Police searching for it, they finally found the perambulator in a remote corner of Bayswater at midnight. In it was contained a 3-volume novel of terrible sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever ingrained upon my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag, in which I intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I never can forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and left the baby in the handbag.
Where? Where did you put it, Miss Prism?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist upon knowing where you deposited that handbag.
I left it in one of London's larger railway station cloakrooms.
Which station?
Victoria, the Brighton line!
My goodness. I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, you will wait for me. Won't you,
If you're
darling?
not long, I'll wait for you for the rest of my life.
What do you think this all means, Lady Bracknell?
I daren't even begin to suspect, Dr. Chasuble. In families who are wealthy, things like these are not supposed to occur. It is hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Guardian has a very emotional nature.
The sound is most unpleasant. It sounds as if you were having an argument, and I deeply despise arguments, especially when they are convincing.
Just stop now.
I wish they would come to some conclusions.
This suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this it? Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Pray, do examine it very carefully before you speak. The happiness of much more than a lifetime depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here is the injury it received from the upsetting of a Grover omnibus in younger, happier days. And here is the stain on the lining from the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred in Leamington. And here, on the lock, are my initials. I'd forgotten that I had them placed there in an extravagant mood. The bag is undoubtedly mine, and I'm delighted to have it returned to me so unexpectedly. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more has been returned to you than just the handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes, Mother.
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried!
Unmarried. My goodness, I cannot deny that is quite the serious blow, but why shall we cast a stone upon those who have done wrong? Cannot the acts of repentance wipe away those of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the woman who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but perhaps you could be so kind as to tell me who I really am.
The news will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I've got a brother after all. I always said I had a brother. Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you've got to treat me with more respect in the future. You've never acted like a brother to me.
Well, I'll certainly try harder now. I've never had much practice on the thing.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you've become someone else?
I'm afraid I don't know. Your decision on my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
Of course, for I never changed, except in my affections.
Well, then it all must be cleared up at once. Lady Bracknell, had I ever been christened?
Being the eldest born, naturally you were christened after your father.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
I've never had much of a relationship with the fellow. He died before I was a year old.
Well, then his name would be in the army lists of the period, wouldn't they?
I suppose his name could easily be found in any military directory.
Yes. 1840. Max Bohm. Mobs. No, what ghastly names they have. Yes, Moncrief. Lieutenant. No, Lieutenant Colonel. General. Christian names. Ernest John? My name is Earnest. I always said my name was Ernest. Gwendolen, my name is naturally Ernest.
Ernest! My own Ernest! I always knew you were an Ernest.
Yes, it is Ernest. I always knew I had a reason for disliking the name.
Darling, it is a terrible thing for a man to realize that for his entire life, he's been speaking nothing but the truth. You will forgive me, won't you?
Of course. For I find that you can change.
My own one.
Letitia!
Frederick, at last!
Darling!
Gwendolen, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be showing signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I believe that just now, for the first time in my life, I've realized the vital importance of being earnest.